His music was legendary, but when it came to romance, Elvis was no saint. Behind his good looks, he hid an arsenal of monstrous desires and a penchant for manipulation he likely picked up at home. His relationship with his mother was unique, to say the least. After grooming 14-year-old Priscilla into his ideal woman, he kept her locked up in Graceland. Although they were doomed to a heartbreaking end, Priscilla never forgot about Elvis. What she wrote in her memoir was devastating and unforgettable. Sadly, even though Elvis was a roaring talent, he also harbored many secrets. One in particular haunted him from the moment he was born. Little Elvis grew up absolutely dirt poor. His father, Vernon, could barely hold down a job. Elvis and his mother, Gladys, often relied on the neighbors or the government for food and support. As a first grader, he impressed his teacher with his singing, so much so that she pushed him to enter a singing contest at a local fair. Although he only placed 5th in the singing contest, the experience ignited in him a love for performing. Elvis absolutely revered black gospel music. He listened to race records via the radio, but racism ensured he only attended blues venues with other white people. Mixing was forbidden. From early on, black artistry helped shape Elvis's musical identity. It was precisely this influence that helped catapult him to the very top. The young crooner got his big break when Sun Records honcho Sam Phillips signed him on specifically because he was looking for a white man to sing African American music. At first, the recording sessions were disappointing, but one fateful night, Elvis tried singing something different, and it was absolute gold. Elvis launched into the song That's All Right with reckless abandon, turning the slow lament into a rocking hit. 3 days later, a local DJ played That's All Right on his radio show, and it caused a sensation. People flooded the station phone lines demanding to know the superstar behind the cover. Even in the early days of his career, Elvis's hips had a mind of their own, and the ladies loved him for it. During one of his performances on the Milton Berle Show, the host convinced Elvis to go on stage without his guitar, saying, "Let him see, son." Well, they certainly saw him. His performance caused a scandal. Without his guitar weighing him down, Elvis's hips went absolutely crazy. Unfortunately, because of his sensuous performances, Elvis earned a nickname that he absolutely despised. People called him Elvis the Pelvis, and he was completely incensed by the moniker, calling it one of the most childish expressions I ever heard. Luckily for him, despite the jokes and the scandal, audiences still came out in droves to see him, especially young girls. But Elvis was completely and utterly devoted to one woman, his mother. And if you're thinking that this might be a red flag, well, you're 100% correct. But Elvis had no shame when it came to the weird closeness he shared with his mother and their downright cringeworthy antics. They had pet names for each other, spoke to one another using baby talk, and even shared a bed well into his teen years. In fact, Gladys grew so attached to her son that she didn't want to share him with anybody else, least of all a woman. Elvis's fame ripped him from the arms of his mother, and while he thrived on his own, Gladys just couldn't cope with the separation. His absence drove her into a deep depression that she never recovered from. As a result, she turned to excessive drinking, effectively destroying her health. Later on, you will see substance abuse ran in the family. Once he gained popularity, Elvis took up with 18-year-old starlet Natalie Wood. Elvis had always admired Natalie from afar, and when he got the opportunity to date her, he jumped at the chance. Once he and Natalie started seeing each other, Elvis went all out. He even rented out entire theaters to take her to the movies. Completely charmed by these romantic gestures, she agreed to fly to Memphis with him to meet his family. Elvis was more than eager to show off his celebrity girlfriend to his parents. However, the visit quickly turned sour. Elvis's mother did not approve of Natalie at all. How shocking. From Natalie's perspective, Elvis's stunted relationship with his mother made her terribly uncomfortable, and she witnessed something so creepy she knew she had had enough. Gladys asked Elvis to come and sit on Mama's lap. Their gratuitous show of affection rubbed Natalie the wrong way. She never forgot the strange experience, and the relationship ended. Both Elvis and Natalie had some fighting words for each other. Elvis referred to her as Mad Nat because of her temper, and Natalie unabashedly dissed him. He can sing, but he can't do much else. Ouch. Throughout his life, Elvis disappointed a whole range of ladies, and it often came down to one particular reason. Although Elvis dated some high-profile women, many of them admitted that the king wasn't down for a romp beneath the sheets. Peggy Lipton claimed that he was virtually impotent. Cassandra Peterson spent one night with him, but instead of fooling around, they ended up chatting the night away. Additionally, Rita Moreno referred to her brief stint with Elvis as amateur hour. These ladies pulled some punches, but the real question remained, why was Elvis so averse to taking women to bed? One of his bodyguards provided some insight into Elvis's preferences. Elvis craved the attention of someone who adored him without the threat of sexual pressure, much as a mother would. Yeah, that sounds about right. Still, Elvis's concerts were nothing short of a riot. Women fell apart in the audience. His music ushered in the rise of rock and roll into mainstream culture. Historians often compared Elvis's influential work to the careers of Glenn Miller and Frank Sinatra. But Frank Sinatra despised Elvis. He absolutely loathed everything about him. He thought rock and roll was brutal, ugly, degenerate, vicious. It is sung, played, and written, for the most part, by cretinous goons. Wow. But what was Elvis's reaction? He took the gentlemanly route and slathered Sinatra in compliments and kindness. He said, "I admire the man. He has a right to say what he wants to say. He is a great success and a fine actor." In 1958, Elvis joined the army and moved to Friedberg, Germany, hoping to be treated like any other soldier. At this time, Elvis's mother was admitted to the hospital. Luckily, he was granted emergency leave to go visit her. Sadly, only 2 days after his arrival, Gladys passed, leaving Elvis absolutely inconsolable. With her passing, Elvis and his mother's unique relationship came to a tragic close. But it's safe to say that Gladys never truly left him. Every single romantic relationship he would have bowed to Gladys's ever-present ghost. When he returned to the army, a sergeant offered him some amphetamines, and they totally blew his mind. The drugs seemed to be the perfect medicine. They helped with stamina and weight loss, and because most of his friends were partaking, Elvis didn't think twice about indulging. This, however, was an incredibly slippery slope. Indulging was something of a problem for Elvis. More on that later. Besides drugs, Elvis discovered something else in Friedberg: Priscilla Beaulieu. Elvis was 24, and Priscilla was only 14. Yikes! It all began one fateful November evening in 1959. A service member invited Priscilla to meet the singer, and when she arrived on his doorstep, Elvis couldn't look away. Priscilla told Elvis that she was only in the 9th grade, but this information didn't faze him in the slightest. In fact, it may have attracted him to her even more. As the night wore on, he made it his mission to impress her, serenading her with songs like "Are You Lonesome Tonight?" and batting his big blue eyes at her. Here's where things get even weirder. Elvis's attraction to little Priscilla had a lot to do with the similarities he noticed between her and, you guessed it, his mother. But that wasn't even the worst part. He told his friend that Priscilla's youth meant she was young enough that I could train her any way I want. And so began one of the most dysfunctional relationships in music history, and that is saying a lot. After arranging a second meeting with Priscilla, Elvis made his intentions known. He whisked her up to his room for a private interlude where they shared a kiss, but nothing more. To appease Priscilla's worried parents, Elvis cranked up the charm. When her father asked him why he was interested in his daughter, Elvis had the perfect response. "Well, sir, I happen to be very fond of her. She's a lot more mature than her age, and I enjoy her company." Throughout his time in Germany, Elvis dominated Priscilla's entire existence. He was all she could think about, and soon she fell behind in school because of exhaustion. Elvis had just the remedy for her and offered some special little pills to help her stay awake. By 1960, his time as a soldier had run its course. It was time to return to a life of fame and recognition. Moving back to LA meant leaving his new flame behind. But the tumultuous tale of Elvis and Priscilla had only just begun. For the next 2 years, Priscilla sent letters to Elvis, slipping her correspondence into pink envelopes so that it wouldn't get lost in the flurry of his fan mail. By 1962, the star set to work, persuading Priscilla's parents to allow her to cross the ocean for him. Once again, his charm paid off, and nearly 2 years after parting, Elvis and Priscilla reunited in Los Angeles. Elvis now had ample time to start molding her into the perfect woman. He plied her with sleeping pills and amphetamines to ensure that her schedule matched his. Elvis changed everything about Priscilla. He controlled her hair and her makeup, and soon he wanted her with him permanently. By 1963, Elvis and Priscilla were comfortably settled at Graceland, an 18-room monstrosity that the star had purchased when he was 22. There was no escape. Elvis fashioned Priscilla into a mirror image of himself. He capped her teeth, corrected her posture, dyed her hair black, gave her a dramatic pompadour, and even color-coordinated their clothes. Later on, Priscilla referred to herself as Elvis's living doll, to fashion as he pleased. Elvis took things to the next level and made Priscilla his bride. The night of their wedding finally broke their string of sexless years, and the two of them slept with one another for the very first time. Priscilla got pregnant almost immediately after marrying Elvis. Unfortunately, the star wasn't exactly stoked to be a father. In fact, he mainly worried about how the baby might affect his career. By the time Elvis welcomed his baby girl Lisa Marie into the world, he and Priscilla were trying their best to make it work. But Elvis had no desire to sleep with his wife now that she'd given birth. Elvis had always been unfaithful, so it's no surprise that he dilly-dallied with other women the entire time he was with Priscilla. Even though the couple eventually overcame their dry spell, he never seemed to satisfy her. She wanted something more out of her love life. Priscilla went behind Elvis's back and conducted an affair of her own. She had finally seen the light, and in recognizing that Elvis was an awful husband, there was only one thing left to do. In 1972, she confronted Elvis and told him that she wanted a divorce. He subsequently found out about her affairs and completely lost it. Priscilla's memoirs offer a first-hand account of that terrifying night. Keep watching to hear her story. Perhaps the most heartbreaking part of all was that despite their problems, both of them loved each other very much. Elvis Presley laid bare his vulnerable side, channeling his heartbreak and anguish into song. Elvis's hit breakup number, Always on My Mind, is his best-known song about Priscilla. By 1973, Elvis's health was in serious trouble. Years of excessive drug use had taken its toll, and his body just couldn't take it anymore. That same year, he had 2 terrifying overdoses. But even as he fell deeper into the spiral of addiction, his comeback demanded his presence at all times. That same year was Elvis's busiest professional year yet. He performed 168 times, and the following year he signed up for yet another round of brutal touring. His failing health scared his bandmates. He was always high. With his muddled speech and growing girth, his friends wondered whether he'd actually be able to finish the tour. Drugs were not Elvis's only addiction. Coming from nothing, Elvis loved to eat. A lot. He famously devoured a sandwich dubbed Fool's Gold, a hollowed-out loaf of bread filled with a jar of peanut butter, a jar of jelly, and a whole pound of bacon, a whopping 8,000 calories in one sandwich. With a diet perfectly tailored to destroy a human body, Elvis's lethal combo of drugs and binge eating was a disaster waiting to happen. After his chapter with Priscilla came to a close, Elvis dove straight into another serious relationship, one that lasted 4 years. Her name was Linda Thompson, a lyricist and actress. In her memoir, Thompson wrote that Elvis required constant reassurance and had a childish, needy disposition. Jealousy was one of the major reasons the relationship imploded. Elvis was toxic and possessive, but even more, he had a history of physical aggression. In her memoir, Priscilla Presley related a horrifying event. When Elvis found out about Priscilla's infidelity, he lunged at her and forced her into submission. She remembers him saying, "This is how a real man makes love to his woman." Later, she changed her story, saying that she'd exaggerated the details, but the damage was already done. Nearing the end of his life, Elvis had one last partner, Ginger Alden. As Elvis's addictions spiraled out of control, his behavior became increasingly erratic. One night, after they went to bed, Ginger awoke to the sound of an ear-splitting shot ringing through the air. Elvis had whipped out a .57 Magnum pistol and fired it, the bullet lodging itself just north of their headboard. Elvis kept a pistol on him, and the reason why is terrifying. Presley's life was often in grave danger, and people constantly threatened him while he was on stage. During one performance, attackers even claimed they would murder him unless he paid them $50,000. The next time Presley performed, he had a derringer in his right boot and a pistol hidden at his waist. By the time 1977 rolled around, Elvis had officially gone off the rails. His concerts became painful to watch. Finally, on August 16, 1977, Ginger Alden made a devastating discovery. She found Elvis unresponsive on the floor of the bathroom, his pajamas bunched up around his feet. He had fallen off the toilet, still curled into a seated position. It was clear even then that he had already passed. After the news broke, the question on everybody's mind was, how did this happen? The official cause of death was cardiac arrest, but the cocktail of drugs in his system probably didn't help. At only 42 years old, an absolute icon had passed. Tragically, his girlfriend Ginger Alden tried to sell her story for a whopping $105,000, eventually settling for less, showing a complete lack of loyalty to her partner in the end. But there was one woman who felt the loss of Elvis more deeply than anyone else. When Priscilla found out about Elvis's passing, it broke her. In her memoir, she remembers locking herself in her room as the waves of hopelessness crashed over her. She wrote, "I wanted to die. Love is very deceiving. Though we were divorced, Elvis was still an essential part of my life. Over the years, we'd become good friends, admitting the mistakes we'd made in the past, and just beginning to laugh at our shortcomings." Despite the fact that their life together was arguably messed up, Priscilla spoke about Elvis with undying reverence and adoration. His entire life, Elvis harbored a secret that may shed some light on his unfortunate choices. The tragic truth was that Elvis had had a twin. His older, identical brother, Jesse, was stillborn just 35 minutes before Elvis came into the world. Even Presley's mother said he had the energy of two people. Perhaps it was this longing for his long-lost sibling that haunted the singer and led him down a path of indulgence, loneliness, and abuse. Thank you for watching this video. Please like and subscribe for more fascinating content.